Picture this. If you dare, you awaken in your own bed, in your own home, on a seemingly ordinary morning, but something is profoundly wrong. The familiar sounds of life, the distant rumble of a delivery truck, the cheerful chirping of birds, the murmur of conversations drifting from open windows, they're all gone, replaced by a silence so deep, so absolute, it feels like a physical presence. You step outside, and the air is still, heavy with an unspoken truth. This is the documented, yet largely unexplained, disappearance of Oak Haven, a secluded Italian village nestled so deep within a forgotten valley, so cut off from the modern world, that its entire population could vanish without so much as a whisper for weeks. And today we are going to meticulously uncover this harrowing story, piecing together the fragmented clues to understand what truly became of the town where everyone vanished. So watch till the end to know the full story behind the mysterious disappearance of people from the town. Oak Haven, or Quercia Valle, as it was known in Italian, was more than just a cluster of homes. It was a living, breathing testament to a bygone era, hidden deep within the Apennine Mountains, accessible only by a winding, treacherous road. It felt like a pocket of time, preserved from the bustling chaos of the 20th century. A few hundred souls, generations of families intertwined, living lives dictated by the rhythm of the seasons and the close-knit bonds of community. Elias Vance, a man who cherished routine and quiet solitude, had left the clamor of the city behind over a decade ago, finding his sanctuary amidst the whispering pines and the gentle flow of the nearby river. Every single morning, like clockwork, Elias would be at his workbench by 7 a.m. His personal alarm clock wasn't a chime or a radio. It was the symphony of Oak Haven awakening. The distant clang of Marco, the blacksmith, hammering at his anvil. The faint, sweet smell of baking bread wafting from old Nonna Elena's bakery down the lane. The cheerful, if sometimes gossipy, chatter of Mrs. Perry sweeping her porch. And, of course, the ever-present, almost comforting sound of the town's ancient church bell tolling 7 times, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the valley. But on one crisp, unnaturally still Tuesday morning in late October, the symphony was gone. Utterly, irrevocably absent. Elias awoke, but the air was devoid of the usual morning clamor. Only the rhythmic tick-tock of his own clocks filled the void. At first, he dismissed it, perhaps a town-wide holiday, a rare communal lie-in. But as the minutes stretched, an icy tendril of unease began to creep into his precise, logical mind. He walked the familiar cobblestone streets, his footsteps eerily loud against the silence. Every door was ajar, every window open. At Nonna Elena's bakery, fresh loaves sat cooling on racks, a half-used bag of flour spilled on the counter. At the central piazza, a game of checkers lay unfinished on a park bench, the pieces still mid-move. Children's toys lay abandoned in the dust, a brightly painted ball resting beside a skipping rope. Cars sat idly in driveways, keys still in the ignition. Laundry, half-folded, still flapped gently on lines, swaying like ghostly figures in the unseen breeze. There were no signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no hasty panicked departures, no bodies. Just an overwhelming, suffocating emptiness where life had once vibrated. It was as if every single person in Oak Haven had simply ceased to exist. One moment there, living their lives, the next gone. Elias Vance, the solitary watchmaker, was left utterly alone, a silent sentinel in a ghost town, forced to confront a reality that defied every logical fiber of his being. Days bled into weeks, and the initial paralyzing shock slowly, agonizingly transformed into a raw, gnawing terror for Elias. The silence, once merely unnerving, became a constant, oppressive weight. He meticulously combed every building, every home, every cellar, every attic, every inch of Oak Haven. He was desperate for a clue, a single sign, any scrap of evidence that could explain the impossible, but he found nothing. just the chilling void, a perfect, unnerving testament to a community that had simply ceased to be. The outside world, for reasons Elias couldn't fathom, remained oblivious. No rescue teams arrived. No curious investigators descended. It was as if Oak Haven itself had been swallowed by the earth, erased from maps, forgotten by memory. Elias, a man whose life revolved around precision and predictable mechanics, found himself adrift in an ocean of terrifying unknowns. His practical mind screamed for answers, but his desperate searches yielded only more questions. Was it a cult, a previously unknown plague, a mass hallucination? Each theory crumbled under the weight of the impossible facts. The most terrifying realization came when he tried to escape. He took his old battered truck, fueled by dwindling gasoline, and drove for hours on the only winding road that led out of the valley. But no matter how far he drove, no matter how many turns he took, the road always seemed to loop back on itself, depositing him right back at the outskirts of Oak Haven. It was as if an invisible, insurmountable barrier surrounded the town, trapping him within its empty confines. The very landscape, the ancient forests themselves, seemed determined to keep Oak Haven's horrifying secret sealed away. As weeks turned into agonizing months, Elias became a living ghost, a lone figure moving through the silent, decaying streets of his former home. He survived on what he could forage and preserve, the clockmaker's precision now applied to the grim realities of survival. But the gnawing mystery of Oak Haven's disappearance gnawed at his sanity. Where had they gone? Why him? And then a memory surfaced from the depths of local lore, an unsettling folktale, often dismissed as the ramblings of superstitious old-timers, the legend of the Deep Dweller. A story whispered for generations about an ancient entity slumbering beneath Oak Haven, intrinsically tied to the very earth itself, said to occasionally stir from its eons-long sleep, demanding a tribute. Driven by a desperate, illogical, yet undeniable compulsion, Elias found himself drawn to Oak Haven's oldest, most imposing structure, the town's dilapidated but still grand church. Not for solace, not for spiritual guidance, but for a forgotten secret, a whispered rumor about a hidden chamber, a catacomb beneath the very foundations of the sanctuary, a place where the town's original founders, centuries ago, were said to have conducted their most sacred and perhaps darkest rituals, practices long since abandoned, or so everyone believed. He spent days, perhaps weeks, in that silent, oppressive church, meticulously searching. His clockmaker's precision, once applied to intricate gears, was now fixated on finding a hidden mechanism. And then, near the crumbling altar, beneath a warped floorboard, he found it. A faint, almost imperceptible etching of a symbol he'd only ever seen in the most obscure, forbidden texts of Oak Haven's forgotten history. A symbol of binding, of sacrifice, and beside it a barely visible crevice in the stone. With a surge of adrenaline that defied his physical exhaustion, Elias pressed against it. With a low, guttural grinding and a shower of ancient dust, a massive section of the stone floor began to slowly, agonizingly slide open, revealing a gaping maw into the earth itself. A gust of cold, damp air, thick with the scent of stagnant water, decaying earth, and something else, something undeniably organic, undeniably alien, washed over Elias. He hesitated for only a moment, his heart hammering against his ribs. Armed with only a flickering, battery-powered lantern, its beam barely piercing the oppressive gloom, he began his descent into the suffocating darkness. Each step down the rough-hewn, slick stairs echoed ominously, his footsteps swallowed by the vast, unseen void below. The silence of Oak Haven above him was nothing compared to the absolute, crushing quiet of the abyss beneath. And then, as the feeble light from his lantern struggled to pierce the fathomless blackness, it revealed a sight that would forever, irrevocably shatter his mind and define the rest of his tortured existence. It wasn't a catacomb. It wasn't a hidden ritual chamber. It was something far, far worse. What Elias witnessed in the abyssal depths beneath Oakhaven defied human comprehension. It was a vast, pulsating, living entity, an ancient, consuming horror woven into the very fabric of the earth itself. The town, its people, hadn't vanished. They hadn't merely left. They had been consumed, systematically, utterly absorbed. Their very essence, their life force, feeding this dormant subterranean nightmare that had slumbered for millennia, only to finally awaken, drawn perhaps by the very quietude of Oakhaven, or by a cosmic alignment we cannot comprehend. The town was not abandoned, it was the entity's sustenance, its terrible final meal. Elias Vance, against all odds, somehow managed to escape that horrifying chamber. He climbed back up, covered in the damp, unsettling residue of the depths, and fled Oakhaven, not looking back. He was found weeks later, miles from the village, delirious, emaciated, and muttering incessantly about the maw, the living earth, and the consuming dark. When he eventually regained some semblance of composure, he tried to tell his story, but no one believed him. The authorities, bewildered by the total lack of evidence, simply dismissed his terrifying account as the ravings of a man utterly broken by trauma and isolation. The official explanation, which gained traction with the few journalists who bothered to investigate, became a mass exodus, an unexplained collective decision by the townsfolk to simply pack up and move on, despite the complete absence of any vehicles, luggage, or forwarding addresses. But Elias Vance knew better. Elias spent the remainder of his life as a recluse, a ghost among the living, haunted by the unspeakable images of Oakhaven's true, horrific fate. He poured every detail, every chilling observation, every terrifying memory into that journal, desperately hoping that someone, someday, would stumble upon his account and truly listen. He died a solitary man, his warnings unheard, his sanity forever questioned by a world unwilling to believe the monstrous truth. Today, Oakhaven, Italy, remains a desolate monument to its lost population, a ghost town slowly being reclaimed by the ancient forests that once cradled it. And some whisper it's just a forgotten relic, another victim of economic hardship and rural depopulation. But what if Elias Vance, the solitary watchmaker, was telling the terrifying truth? What if somewhere deep beneath that quiet, abandoned village, something still sleeps, something ancient, something hungry, something waiting for the next town, the next community to fall silent enough for it to awaken once more? Was it truly a mass departure, a bizarre collective amnesia, or was Oakhaven merely the first course, the initial meal for an entity far, far older, far more horrifying than humanity itself, now merely dormant, digesting its latest victim, and patiently awaiting its next opportunity? And what do you believe truly happened in Oakhaven? Share your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to the channel for more terrifying stories and check out the other videos on the channel. See you all in the next video. Peace out.